plan or a policy and put it into action. So the regular review, and most importantly, the regular review of a policy or plan, even when it's working perfectly, is a critical mechanism to have in place. And there's a method that a lot of governments use, and that's to pilot test policies before making them wide scale. So policy pilots are discussed and used, but usually only for a very short period of time. In fact, what is needed is a policy to be sort of continually in pilot testing mode, because there's always lessons to learn every year, even after we've launched it into a larger scale implementation. So everything should be in a continual pilot testing mode. And that's the paradigm shift, I think, for planning and policy making, is that we never really will have it right, and we can't assume that we'll ever get it right, but we need to learn our way toward that. And there are a number of examples out there where these formal policy review processes are put in place and used quite effectively. Promoting variation, very critical. This particular tool is really, you see across any sector that's trying to struggle with better decisions in complex environments. So given the complexity of most policy settings, implementing a variety of policies to address the same issue increases the likelihood of achieving desired outcomes. I think that's just a sort of a well understood concept. Diversity also forms a really common risk management approach, and it facilitates the ability to perform efficiently in the face of unanticipated conditions. So Peter Burry talked a bit about diversity in his welcoming remarks, and variation and diversity is critical for organizational management and learning, as it is for policy design and planning. There are ways, and Srija will talk a lot about this on Wednesday, in terms of how a policymaker can help foster variation. It's a nice concept, but how do you really sort of build it into policy and planning? And there's three different modes a policymaker or a planner could find themselves in terms of trying to promote variation. And one is the policymaker as an architect, to help provide and look for a range of policy options, designing mixes of policy instruments, including economic instruments, regulatory instruments, expenditure instruments, research and development, things like that. Making the linkages between different policies that have synergistic effects. There's also the policymaker could be a facilitator, creating the enabling environment for variation to occur, for innovation to occur, and that involves actually helping to build sort of the ability to social network and self-organizing capacity. Finally, the policymaker as a learner is really a critical tool for fostering variation, to learn to implement a mix of policies, but then to learn which ones are working and which ones aren't, and to maybe discontinue ones that aren't working and strengthen others that are. So the learning is an important mode, and Srija will get into this in a lot more detail. Finally, the last couple of tools that are dealing with this ability to self-organize, which is one of the most critical principles, I think, that you see across the literature and across experience in order for enhancing the ability of actors to respond to change on the ground. It's using that social capital and leveraging that social capital that exists. But first of all, in order to enable self-organizing of actors on the ground, probably the most important thing is to not undermine existing social capital through our policy interventions. Creating forums for enabling social networking, that can be done. Facilitating the sharing of good practices to enable the copying of behaviors. Removing barriers to self-organization. These all strengthen the ability of stakeholders to respond to unanticipated events, and it is that ability which is really critical in looking forward, and is particularly so in the climate change sphere. Examples in Canada where user associations, for example, a soil conservation association started up to introduce a new soil conservation practice in the prairie agriculture region in Canada. It started up with some federal government funding, an association with federal funding that fostered new ways of soil conservation that spread across the prairies and had big positive impact. It enables farmers to interact with researchers, with industry that built technologies for this new zero-till conservation practice, and fostered a really unique sort of collection of sharing that really enabled farmers to do a lot of things, including focusing on other things that soil conservation wasn't originally intended for, and that was perhaps for soil carbon storage. Decentralization of decision making, different than self-organization, very different. It's a sort of the formal process of where authority and responsibility for decision making occurs at the lowest effective jurisdictional level and accountable unit of governance. To sort of increase the capacity of a policy or plan to perform, because on the ground is really where the messages and signals occur first. So we need to be able to have our systems and our governance respond very quickly on the ground. And there are examples of this in watershed management in just about every region of the world. So just to wrap up again, main sort of message is that for adaptive governance, to be thinking about adaptive governance, the topic of this session, that we need to be thinking about our ability to plan for the anticipated, to deal with anticipated conditions, but equally important, we need to understand what we can do to help policies and plans respond to the unanticipated, to the unknown unknowns, to the surprises that will be inevitable in sustainable development settings. And what can we do to help actors on the ground respond autonomously in that type of a setting? So thank you very much for your attention, and look forward to further discussion on the adaptive governance topic. Thank you. Peter. And Mori-san. Got to turn it back to the the proper chair here.
Thank you, Darren. Very informative, interesting presentation. So a bit of time for questions and answers. So anyone who have questions or comment on his presentation, please.
Chuang Chao from the Federation of Thai Industry. Mr. Swanson, I think on page 15 or 16, you have mentioned that the variety of policies will bring success. I do not quite understand whether this assumption is correct. Normally, in our experience, variety of policy addressing the same issue normally cause confusion rather than solution. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's it's a very good point in terms of the message from, I guess, that stakeholders receive on the ground from different policies trying to accomplish the same thing I guess could be confusing. I think that the message though is about there is no silver bullet policy or plan that can affect a change that is desired in settings that involve people and nature interacting closely. So it requires different things to foster change, and is actually both the literature and the experience out there is suggesting that it's the system itself that will tell us what works and what does not work. So a variety of approaches to a situation is really critical for success. But it's critical only if we listen to the lessons and the signals that come from the implementation of different ways of accomplishing a goal. Without that sort of policymaker as learner sort of twined, we don't necessarily learn from the lessons of doing multiple things. So I acknowledge that yes, can be confusing if multiple policies are doing maybe things that don't synchronize. But the variety is really a key mechanism that is being sort of used to try to achieve success, and we see this in organizations and both in policy development.
Okay, please.
Darren, thank you for your presentation. I got one sentence that you said that really struck me. Everything has to be in pilot mode, you said. Everything? Is that really practical? When we're talking about transition towards a low-carbon economy, we're talking lots of money to be invested. And there has to be some security or continuation in this investment process. So not everything can be on pilot mode, I think.
Yes, I think everything could and should be in pilot mode, but I guess maybe it's how we sort of interpret, I guess, the pilot. If it's pilot being seen as, well, we'll just give this a little bit of a try, and not worry about sort of everything that needs for the policy to actually sort of work and happen.